Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Barbara Harmon, yes, you have once again found your way into the darkness of the fox den to awaken me from my slumber for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Ooh, that was absolutely delicious. Even though I have been living off of V8, this is definitely a massive upgrade. Without further ado, it is time for Barbara and myself to take a walk into the darkness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. This is the home and the stomping ground of the Midnight Society. We once again sit around the late night fire and burn the timber in an attempt to figure out the strangeness that is occurring across our country. Again, Barbara Hartman sits down with us to host a few chapters out of the Midnight Society book. How you been, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you, Kenny?
Excellent to hear that you're doing well. And I
Yeah.
have just been grinding,
Yep.
editing, repeat.
Yeah,
So you know how it is.
I definitely know. I got back from Pennsylvania about a week ago now, and prior to that, we were on the coast of Washington State, and gosh, I got a lot of good investigation time in, and some pretty compelling, kind of evidence, I guess you'd say. So I did send a photo to you, which you were able to enhance with a potential dog man on, I don't know, on my farm in Pennsylvania. What did you think about that?
That is definitely some interesting stuff for sure. And I did get a chance to see that. And I tried to glam it up for you, I guess, as
You
much
did a
as
great,
possible
great
without
job.
distorting
And
it too, because you know how it is. That's the thing with people, they
yeah.
don't realize with editing, you got to have
Hmm.
something to work with. There's sometimes people will send me something that's so blown out with the pixels, and I have to
Yes.
explain to
Yeah.
them that every time I edit it, I'm
Hmm.
blowing out those pixels a tad too. So if you're already
Right.
sending me something that is completely blown out, I can't fix it because there's nothing
Right.
to grip from the quality right there. But
For
something like
sure.
that, yes, I have an organic thing to work with that hasn't already been,
Hmm.
pre-edited. So definitely interesting stuff. I mean, you're in Pennsylvania when you were up there. We're talking about Shenango Valley. So you got those footprints that
Hmm.
Jamie King sent us that we can't verify that legit look like a human foot with the claws on the front and back.
Yeah.
Super strange stuff. So
Wow. Yeah.
Pennsylvania is an area that's got a lot of wilderness, and my stepdad actually was from Honesdale, and we
Oh,
went
yeah.
down there when we were younger, and I remember cruising through the Poconos and all that stuff.
Yep.
There was an area that they went, and all the locals used to, and I guess they'd go down and feed the deer. And when you were saying that the population, there's a ton of them. There was a ton back then. You could
Yes.
literally drive your
Yep.
car down, and there'd be hundreds of them coming up to like
Yeah.
eat carrots and such. So that
Yep.
is definitely a really interesting area, and it's technically not up in the Northeast, but it's pretty dang close. I mean, you're getting that area of the dense forest aspects for sure.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm not really surprised at all that you potentially would have had a run-in with something. I mean, just recently, I was watching an individual that is in Pennsylvania, and I mean, he has all these wild raccoons that come and chill with him, okay? And he
Whoa.
goes outside. Literally, he spent $30 on grapes and was feeding him like
Oh
cookies
my
and stuff. And
gosh.
you know how like I tell you how some of the neighborhood squirrels chill like that. Well,
Yeah.
it's so cool. It's hilarious. But either way, he is in an area where there's so much forest like that, and he's right down in Pennsylvania, which is pretty cool. So again, it doesn't have as much wilderness per se as Maine or Washington, but it's
Hmm.
pretty dang dense, and you can go to some areas in there where you're not really gonna probably have a bunch of human activities. I remember now, I was interested in obviously Sasquatch and stuff, but I was still a little young and my parents were really all about soccer and stuff. So I guess that's pretty much
Yeah.
where my mind was. But I remember my
Mhm.
stepdad's family lived on an basically it wasn't like an apple orchard, but it kind of was. It wasn't theirs. It was just a natural little area with apples. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, so I'd never put two and two together, but now, I mean, I don't even know if they own this property. I don't really talk to my stepdad too much, but I would think it would be
Yeah.
pretty cool now to go down and be like, well,
Mm.
apples, so that means there had to have been deer, coons, and all kinds of things around there. You know, it'd be interesting to see what else was
Right.
plucking around. So if
Yeah.
you want to maybe elaborate a little bit as to what occurred with you, that'd be great.
Well, we just kind of intended to just kind of go for a little walk. The property has been in my husband's family since he was a baby, and when his parents got divorced, his mom wanted, half of the value of the property, and my husband was an adult at the time, so he's like, well, I'm gonna, we can buy mom out, but we'll buy the property. My husband bought the property in totality, from him. And, so, and then his dad had lifetime, tenantship or whatever. But so nobody's lived there since last year. His father passed away. And he was, I mean, my father-in-law was 101 years old. So he had a good life, right? But that definitely kept him going being on the farm. But so no one's lived there. It's in a quite rural area. It's 114 acres, and we have some of it leased out to a tree farm. So in the video, that's what kind of you can see some of that, and they had to raise the. They normally, they put up fences, but they had to put them really high because they were saying like, and don't be alarmed, because these are some really. I was like, whoa, because the deer, were getting over the fences and just eating everything, eating these Christmas trees, and then there's some, I think, I don't know what some kind of birch trees. And so anyway, we're like, yeah, and it looks great. So we were just going to take a walk around. We have trail cams set up that my husband is able to, they'll send him a text, with the film if there's any kind of movement, but he needed to change some batteries. So we're just taking a walk around, and I started to see some really bizarre um, evidence of tree structures and kind of like, I'd say, like wood art that typically you'll see like a Bigfoot in a squatchy kind of area. And we had the farm timbered a few years ago. So yes, there's piles of cut trees that were, kind of in neat piles sitting around here and there. We had asked the timber company, just leave them there. We'll just allow them to it's good for the forest, kind of just to let this stuff laying around. But they were all rearranged, and we're talking, these are like big trees, they're not little things, and there's no reason that there would be humans in there messing around with this stuff. Who's going to make different, I don't know, wood art and pile, like different piles and just bizarre stuff. So I was so interested. I just told my husband, like, go ahead, you go ahead and do the batteries. I really want to do some investigation. And when I saw what could potentially be a dogman, which I didn't think at all. I don't know how to, don't know signs of dogmen. I don't believe I've ever seen one. Maybe now I have, I don't know. But anyway, I could see this thing that appear like that seemed to be looking at me, and it's quite far away, and I think I sent you the video, so I don't even know how far away it was, but it was enough that I could see that it looked like it was something. um and I was thinking, is it, I don't know, uh a black, I don't want to say dog. I don't want to say that. I just, or maybe a small, like a bear, because we have a lot of black bears. I was like, maybe it's a baby bear. But it didn't behave like a bear, because they'll typically, if they see you and they're scared, they just kind of just walk away, or they just kind of go about their business. This thing stood very still for the whole time. I was like, I was, had the camera panned over to it, and then I thought, well, it's not moving, so whatever, maybe it's, I couldn't see it that well. When a few days later, I had released the preliminary videos on my YouTube channel, and people start messaging me like, oh my gosh, that looks like an area, like those look like tree structures, a Dogman. That's supposedly they do this very like primitive dens that they build or whatever, and that's what people were saying. And I'm like, I don't know. Then I go and I review the video with this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, that looks like a dog. uh I don't know if you could say a dog man, but it definitely looked like a big dog. And sent it to some of my I have some friends that they're really gifted in what they can, extract from pictures. And the one woman said, oh yeah, that's definitely a dog man. And then she said, you can see the arm. And she was explaining to me essentially what you were. I couldn't even, what you did, Kenny, as far as enhancing, because I couldn't even see. I was thinking that its ears were back further, that its head was much bigger. And I thought that's bizarre looking. But when you enhanced it, it's like, oh, now I see what she meant. So that was that. So, we'll see. We don't have any plans to go back and, do any sort of investigation, or even to go back. Probably not, definitely not this year, maybe next year. So we'll see where we're at, at that point. But it's a perfect habitat, because like I told you, it's overpopulated with deer. Nobody, my son, our son-in-law, and then a friend of ours, they will hunt on the property during deer season, but you can only get so many, you're only allowed to take so many, deer, to tag so many, and to, so there's still going to be, an amazing population for them. So if, I guess, if there's a dog man family out there, that's the perfect place for them to, to set up shop and feed themselves. I don't know. So
Dang. Yeah, no, that's definitely some pretty interesting, bizarre, terrifying, all a little wrapped up into one right there. Because I mean, obviously,
yeah.
whatever animal it is, you probably don't want to encroach on its home. I mean, earlier I
Hmm.
was watching in the background these people that rescue raccoons and just relocate them. This one, she had her little cubs in a trash can right in the front of some building that a ton of people go back and forth from, okay? And
Hmm.
man, that thing got pissed. Like when they were trying to relocate her and they're just trying to help her right there. So moral of what I'm trying to say is you don't really want to go out to any sort of
And
animal's area
no.
because they're gonna
Yeah.
not be happy. No, I'm not going anywhere. Free food delivered to
Yes.
me all the
Yes.
time. Like, yo, you get out of here. So same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
I
They
mean,
get vicious.
yeah,
They
they're
get
super
so
cool, but this thing was pissed. But yeah, you don't really want to walk over to that area because even if it was, like I said, a den of a black bear, coyotes, anything, they're going to be pissed off. So to make
yeah.
that reference, like you said about the kind of primitive structures, it's really interesting. It's
Hmm.
no different than look at some of like the survival shelters that, Survivor Man and
Hmm.
some of these other people will
Yeah.
make.
Like bushcraft. Hmm.
Yes, so I believe the cynocephali would do the same thing, especially if they were making weaponry that the Romans and Greeks wanted to trade to get their hands on, and
Hmm.
because they were that advanced. And recently, though, I've been introduced to a couple cool topics that really fall into what we're still talking about here, but also the difference of the classifications, meaning how people will say dogman when it could be a
Hmm.
werewolf, it could be a hyena,
Hmm.
it could be a short-faced cave bear, etc. Well, the reason I wanted to tap in onto that is the difference in the behaviorisms, meaning when you look at things, well, animals adapt, okay, and they
Hmm.
become new and keen to their area that they are now living in. And a prime
Mhm.
example of this is the Gigantopithecus. Recently, they have found a lot more molars and pieces of the jaw and other parts where they're able to really put together what this ape looked like. And they are almost positive, but remember, only fools are positive, but they're almost
Yeah.
positive that this thing was bipedal and preferred to be
Uh,
bipedal. Okay. And
mhm.
yes, with its teeth, it had teeth like ours, but keep in mind, Homo erectus throughout history decided to eat meat instead of just berries and such. And that's when our
Mhm.
brain started to grow, and Homo erectus basically kind of got an advantage over other Neanderthals and other additions of men and women. Well, they're thinking the same thing happened to the Gigantopithecus, that they were encroached on by Homo erectus
Mhm.
and that they were forced out of their area to survive, and they had to adapt
Mhm.
and change their diet, not just eat grains and grass now, but eat, pieces of meat, kind of like a bear as
Mhm.
well, which would
Right.
change their teeth. So now when people are saying Bigfoot, Sasquatch, wild men, well, these scientists that are brilliant are pretty optimistic that we're dealing with different things, kind of like I just listed with the Dogman, meaning that
Mhm.
most likely the Gigantopithecus, we're only talking about 11,000 years ago, supposedly again, that this thing went
Mhm.
extinct. They don't
Yeah.
think it did. And if you look at some of the areas where sometimes people have Sasquatch behaviors with a wood knocking,
Mhm.
yes, a man or a woman primitive could do that as well, but that is ape behavior, and a lot with, like,
Yeah.
some of the bent over trees and such. But then
Right.
when you look in other areas like the mountain wild men, the Yetis and things, what these scientists think happened is Neanderthals consumed Homo erectus. It is proven that they like to eat us.
Mhm.
And if you
Yeah.
look at the fact of how humans are terrified of anything that looks like us, and we go out in the forest and we always see faces in shadows and things, well, that's a way to
Mhm.
protect yourself because Neanderthals used to come and take our women and children and consume us. Well, it's really interesting about that. That ties into a bunch of the Native American lore. Okay, so
Yeah.
yes, now you could have some of the Gigantopithecus taking people too. Okay, because baboons
Mhm.
do that, and which is interesting. The Gugwe, face eater, dogman,
Yeah.
baboon,
Yeah.
werewolf. Okay, well, guess what? Baboons take children over in India and eat their faces. Okay,
Oh
and I
gosh.
watched a
Yeah.
video the other day on National Geographic. A
Oh my
female baboon
gosh.
just gave birth, and the male reached over, yum, 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 snack time. And
Oh.
yes, interesting. So you got the Gugwe face eater. Well, now
Yeah.
when you look at these Neanderthals, Homo erectus obviously pushed them away because they were consuming us, and we most
Mhm.
likely pushed them into caves and up into the
Yeah.
mountains where we don't go anyhow, and all kinds of people are going missing. So these
Mhm.
scientists believe that Neanderthal man and woman is still kicking around, and also so is Gigantopithecus, and it's all falling into the same category of Bigfoot and Sasquatch, even though there are differences but similarities. And
Mhm.
as we evolved, people don't realize we had an ancestor that was around 7 to 7.5 feet tall because of the type of prey they were dealing with. Okay.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
a lot of other things people don't realize is Homo erectus, we are pretty feeble, okay? Meaning we have our brains and things, but a Neanderthal would have been more compared to like a chimpanzee and could have easily just grabbed your arm and ripped you off because
Mhm.
apes as well as Neanderthal man more or less had very similar kind of muscle structures and such. It's kind of like with chimpanzees. If you look at their Achilles tendons, they're built different than ours. Ours are meant for explosive running and things at points in time
Right.
where
Mhm.
theirs aren't, okay? Well, same thing with
Yeah.
Neanderthals, more short and stocky. They couldn't really lift their arms above over their head. They didn't throw things. They didn't use bow and arrows. If people look at the way they hunted, they would ambush the mammoths and things up close and spear the living Christmas trees out of them,
Mhm.
and then either pull parts back to the cave or the whole entire beast. Homo
Mhm.
erectus would be able to outsmart them. We would be able to set traps. We would use bow and arrows. We could throw things because there is evidence of Homo erectus throwing spears at cave lions and disposing of them like with
Yeah.
that. And we already talked about how big some of those cave lions in North America, up to 1,500 pounds, and could look like a 6 foot
Right.
man in the face. And these things would run
Wow.
30 to 35 miles per hour.
Mhm.
So again,
Mm.
it all still kind of ties into the aspect of, wow, that's really bizarre, but also makes a ton of sense with the difference in the behaviorisms. But also
Right.
now to add some more spice to the soup here or whatever, Robert Prevost from our science team I'm a big believer in the cynocephaly, but he
Mhm.
actually isn't really sold on that, and he was able to bring up some evidence, same thing with a lot of historical Sasquatch encounters, of
Mhm.
racism, that these people were actually depicting other tribes and other humans, such as you and I, in
Yes.
racist ways.
I say this because this is exactly what I was going to talk about today with all the, yeah, wow. But with all the
Yes.
information that I have, you know what, I'll save it for our next show together. But yeah, so continue. Wow. Because this is
Yes. So
exactly what I found.
even though I believe in cynocephaly, there is a decent probability that
Yes.
maybe there was some racism going on there. Maybe they wore, animal furs and such and came down from the
Yes.
mountains, and then the Greeks, because they were pompous and just thought they were ooh-hoo, like, the
Yeah.
first version of like the New Age, how I believe it was France was the first people to really come up with cleanliness, I guess, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
yes,
And like the vanity kind of
yes,
thing.
and the
Yeah.
Greeks
Yeah.
and Romans were like that. So if you
Yeah.
were a tribe that did live up in the mountains and were more
Hmm.
primitive based, yes, they would frown upon you. So I'm not saying that is, because I do believe in the cynocephaly, but that is a very interesting twist. So it is something that needs to be potentially looked at, because unfortunately racism still occurs in 2024. And why would it not have occurred throughout the rest of history?
Right. Right. And there's also, how genetic abnormalities
Yes.
can run in families, and certainly if there's some, what we would consider almost like inbreeding, but it
Mm-hmm.
was necessary at the time,
Mm-hmm.
because how else are you going to, if you have a small clan, a good small tribe, continue to grow your tribe? And they wouldn't even, and that, I mean, we know there's historical evidence of that with royals. There were a lot of royals that
I know,
had
isn't that
some
so
pretty
messed up? The ones that thought they
messed
were
up.
so much better than everybody. Hey, I'm gonna
Yes.
go across the hallway
Yeah.
instead of across town. Yeah, what?
Yeah. Yeah. And because they didn't want to uh what do I want to say, like sully that blood, but like
Oh, they
not
sullied it, all
realizing that,
right.
oh, yeah.
What the
So I
Christmas
wonder,
trees?
I wonder if that also, one of in my research, I was and like I said, we'll talk about it next time, but it was kind of on Saint Christopher. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I was thinking is that, I think it's pretty safe to say that we know he was a giant. If he wasn't a cynocephaly, we don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that he was a giant. Now, was he an actual giant? What did he have? Did he have issues with? I mean, there's gigantism, that
Yes.
people. And that can definitely give your, features will grow faster than the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he looked like a canine.
That's what I'm saying right there. Yeah, beautiful stuff.
Yeah,
And plus, in the past, people don't realize humanity was shorter and smaller. So picture
yeah,
somebody like Joel Embiid. Okay, he plays in the NBA. He's a center for the Philadelphia 76ers. Dude's like seven
mhm.
six. So
Yeah, yeah,
put
yeah.
him back in that point in time, right? Would he
Right.
have not been a
Yes.
giant? I mean, not
Yes.
people could
Mm-hmm.
have grown to that height back then if they had proper nutrition. Sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not as prevalent in the past to have people grow that big, because we were not
Mm-hmm.
having proper nutrients. We were barely
Right.
getting by, which is another reason they thought Homo erectus advanced over Neanderthals, because they stored their food, okay? And they knew how
Mhm.
to basically like salt it and brine it, whereas the Neanderthals would more or less like starve through the winter. So
Yeah.
they would never really be able to fully keep on evolving in a way, whereas Homo erectus, we're all chilling, fire going here, we got our wolves
Mm-hmm.
around us. Oh yeah, man, look at all this rhino meat. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
go.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
don't have to go outside and be cold, whereas like I said, the
Right.
Neanderthals would have had to keep on hunting and struggle in the snow and such. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very interesting you brought that up, because I am super science based, but I do understand, like Steve Stockton was saying about how his father was a scientist, and his father was very much like my mind frame, according to Steve, which is cool. But he also would explain how sometimes in the laboratory anomalies happen, that no matter
Right.
how hard he tried to replicate it or
Mm-hmm.
tried to understand how it occurred, it just didn't make sense. So
Mm-hmm.
that is definitely occurring as well. I mean, there's scientific stuff that we can talk about, but then there's other things that still need to be looked at with, like we were just saying, the unfortunate racist depictions or the
Mm-hmm.
ancestor aspects. But for
Mm-hmm.
some reason, people just tend to want to overlook a lot of this stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't really understand why, because it all ties into what we're trying to do. I mean, whether it's Dogman or Bigfoot, I mean, the evidence is there, like we've spoken about
Yeah.
before with the ancient relatives and now with the Neanderthal man, etc. So it's mind-boggling for sure.
There was also and I don't remember the name. I don't know if it's in my research, but it was a tribe of people. I don't know if I even added it. Anyway, I'll just go from, from memory. It was a tribe of people that the men were very, they said like hideous looking, and the women were very beautiful, were thought to be, at the time, very beautiful. And the men were very, protective of anybody that came. They basically didn't want, I think they're like, we don't want anybody to come and take our beautiful chicks. But these women were not, they were attracted to these hideous looking men. So I don't know, that's another thing. Like if whatever that uh is in, not in vogue, but you know what I mean, like in whatever people are attracted to, they're going to form an opinion. Like they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? These women thought that these hideous looking men, which maybe they weren't even hideous looking, maybe it was just they had something that the people at the time felt was unfavorable about them. Maybe it was just racism, maybe it was jealousy. I don't know, but I thought that was really interesting.
That's all interesting stuff. And as you were speaking, I remember when you had just referred to sometimes the birth defects as well. There are animals that
Yeah.
have been born with horns before that aren't supposed to have horns, like little nubs and such. Okay,
Yeah.
so picture now, no different if a cynocephaly is a being and it was
Yeah.
born. What if it then had maybe a case of the nubs or a little bit of horns? Then someone
Hmm.
could be like, wow, that dog man had horns. I just thought that was interesting.
Yes, like the person that I did the story on, that I shared, on our last show, that they claimed that it had, well, the son thought that this thing had horns. But again, that's, who knows, and that's a very good point. It could have been some sort of genetic defect, anomaly, whatever.
Hmm.
But it's all, yeah, interesting. And you and I were talking a little bit before, off air, before we went on the air, that it's it's really hard when you're doing research like this. It's very hard to distinguish, obviously, what is true. Um, a lot of the records are based on, biblical references,
Hmm.
or skewed historical. And I'm not saying anything against the Bible. I don't mean
Hmm.
that. But I know, we all know the Bible put things in, as they wished, as far as terminology, and just everything else, like even all the other records that are available. That is, who knows? We have no idea if that's true or not. What would they think when they saw the constellations, or if they would see a tornado
Hmm.
or a volcano? There's just um a bunch of different things that they could come up with in their mind. That must have been so terrifying, not knowing what this thing is. What is this that's creating this?
Hmm.
So it is hard to do. And I also, there was there's a little chat that I'm in with a well-known researcher, and she was talking about something that had happened to her, and she was given a name, um possibly through mind speaker telepathy or whatever. So she said to the group, does anybody know what this is? Well, Googling it gives you a name, but then one of the other members said, hey, you got to be careful with this stuff, because a lot of the stuff now on Google is based on, kind of, what do I want to say, like pop culture.
Hmm.
These names are given to, like video game characters,
Hmm.
and it will be on Google as it's fact, like this is what this is. And then there's a non-factual, but it appears that it's fact, um, notation, and that's the first thing that comes up. So yeah, it's We have to be really careful. But you always say that, everybody, we can tell you what we find, but you have to do your own research and come up with your own opinions. And
Right?
maybe, like I said, some of this stuff, I feel like we're just not meant to know for whatever reason.
No,
So
that's
many
beautiful
mysteries.
stuff right there. And it's also no different than like history, okay? I mean, I love to
Yeah.
learn, but whoever is the victor writes history. And
Right.
again, I'm
Yep.
spiritual, so I don't know much about biblical stuff until people tell me, like you were just informing me. But then in a logical aspect, it would be no different than someone that's writing the historical book because it's from their
Hmm.
perspective, meaning if they were doing
Right.
it right in the proper way, they would be including all perspectives. But we all
Hmm.
know that controlling the narrative is something that just
Right.
happens.
That's everybody
So,
else. But also, if they don't have the information, right? I mean,
yes,
it's just their perspective. So it might not even be a thing where I think we see a lot of today where it's kind of skewed to, to meet an objective or to form a
right.
narrative,
And that makes me wonder too, potentially, whoever was writing some of those biblical texts, same thing. I
Hmm.
mean, were they gathering all the information, or were they just presenting something, or were they
Yeah.
off their rocker? I mean, unfortunately, look at like what you and I were talking about earlier between something I dealt with and you dealt with. People are insane that you think are
Yeah.
not
Yes.
insane. So,
Right, right. And I know for
yeah.
a fact because I did a lot of research on this when I was younger in college. There was a lot of terms that were removed from the Bible and replaced with other, like leviathans, sea creatures, and
Hmm.
what they would have called that were dinosaurs, and they would replace them with things like jackal or like some sort of a snake, just
Hmm.
to kind of dragons, so that a lot of those terms were in the original biblical works, but they were removed for, whatever the reason of the people that wanted them to be removed.
Yeah, kind of controlling
So
the narrative again a little
yeah,
bit, more or
exactly.
less.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got something too for you, two things actually before we let you go. One is
Okay.
from your neck of the woods again, so be careful. I had
Oh yeah.
somebody that recently told me that they were out pretty deep in Washington, just
Hmm.
hiking. They love hiking with some of their
Yeah.
friends, and they have come across not just this one individual, I spoke to others, homeless encampments out there, okay?
Oh
Really
yeah.
deep in the forest. Nothing
Yep.
happened to them, but the
Mhm.
vibes they were getting weren't really too positive.
Mm, yeah.
So it's out there. We do have
Yes.
proof that they are out there, and
Mm,
just be careful with
right.
that as well.
Yeah,
And
definitely. Yeah.
yeah, you want to just be careful. And then this right now, too, I found to be so interesting. And it really just ties into making sure people are what? Using proper ammunition and weapons to take
Oh
care of
yeah.
something if you need to. Because, all right, if you use a 9 millimeter on a grizzly bear, you're just gonna piss it off. If
Hmm.
you use the average coyote hunting or buckshot, I don't know the most about guns, but yes, those, you're just gonna piss it off, okay?
Yes.
So
Hmm.
now, same thing with Dogmen and others that are gonna basically be big game predators. Okay, you
Hmm.
need to make sure you're using proper weaponry. Well,
Right.
recently, this bear, I don't know if it had to be disposed of or someone actually was hunting it, but I do know that it was enormous. And as they were
Oh.
overlooking this grizzly bear, they
Uh-huh.
saw something strange in between its shoulder blades.
Oh,
They're like, "What the
really?
heck?" So as they're looking
Oh.
closely to it, it was a hunting knife, and the hunting knife
Oh my
was
gosh.
enlarged really deep in there, but the
Oh.
bones and the muscles had grown around it, and basically it
Oh,
wasn't of any sort of issue anymore. And they were pretty optimistic, unfortunately. Whoever put that in the back of that thing's back, it was their last attempt at survival before the bear
wow.
consumed them.
Oh.
But
Whoa.
yes, so super dark, but super cool, and just goes to show you that that little knife, or I mean, it was a large size knife, but it did
Yeah.
absolutely nothing to that bear, and it
Yeah.
had been in
Yeah.
there for so long that the bear's
Yeah.
bones had basically molded around it more or less, and it was
Oh,
surviving still. So I
wow.
thought that was pretty
That's
terrifying.
that is well, and it's like the guy that again, the guys from the last from the witness testimony that that I given on the last show. They this thing just kept coming at them, and they're shooting it,
Mm-hmm.
with their high powered weapons, AK-47s. Yeah, and they're
Mm-hmm.
just shooting and shooting, repeating, and this thing, finally they were able to, find a spot in the forehead, which brought it down. But prior to that, they just were shooting it. Wasn't even, it was just pissing it off, like you said. It just
Yes.
kept coming at them. Yeah.
I mean, look at like Gustav. I don't know if you ever heard about him. He is a crocodile that is a Nile crocodile that has
Oh,
believed to have consumed in, I believe it's over 200 higher of humans. Well, this
wow.
thing, there was a documentary National Geographic did on it, and a bunch of other people trying to come and figure out and catch it and be able to remove it. But this thing is so riddled shooting at it that
Wow.
and attacking it. It's got wounds all over. Okay, there's literally
Oh my
pock marks
gosh.
where someone was using a machine gun mounted on a boat shooting at this thing.
Whoa.
So
Wow.
just to go and show people that animals are durable. Yes, if you would have
Yeah.
got the thing in the head, Gustav, like it's still alive. You could unalive it. But I mean, this
Yeah.
thing's taking freaking rounds that are meant for like tanks and things, okay?
Right, right.
And this thing is still out
Wow.
there supposedly chugging around. So no, it's really
Yeah, because
interesting.
there's a very tiny spot in their skull that you have to
Yes.
hit that spot, or you're not going to do really anything. It's going to bounce off of them because of the way that they're formed. Their bodies are.
Yes.
Whoa,
So I mean, it's
crazy.
so cool, but I just love to learn it in general. And I mean, like last night before I was going to bed, I'm just sitting there learning about the cave lions as I'm editing stuff. And I was actually learning some more. I will talk to you more about it next time. And it's going to actually be
Okay.
out on one of my future episodes with our science team about how there's some really large dogs that weren't actually dogs, that looked like hyenas, that weren't hyenas, that were in North America. And
Whoa.
again, they really kind of fall into line with like the bear dogs and such. And it's just
Hmm.
beautiful information. But for some reason, people, I don't know, just don't want to pay attention to it. So I advise
Yeah.
everyone to just learn. It's great stuff.
It is. It is definitely.
So, well,
Yeah.
thanks, Barb, for hanging out with
Of
us tonight, like
course.
always, and coming in with some great information and keeping me updated on what's occurring your way and such. I truly
Of course.
appreciate you and value you as a member of the Midnight
Oh,
Society, and I'll
I appreciate you
definitely.
too. Yeah. Such
Well,
a great
yes, I
friend.
look forward to continuing to churn out content. I'm glad you're a part of my team. I'm glad you're one of my best friends, and I am
Me
glad that
too,
you are a
Anita. Yeah.
great researcher. So keep
Yeah.
doing
Thank
what you're
you.
doing. Don't let anybody discourage you from learning and
Nope.
gathering knowledge because it's priceless. So.
I am a tough chick, despite sometimes people think I'm too nice, but oh yeah, don't cross me, you know?
My creatures, I do adore every single one of you. And thank you for taking time out of your busy night to come hang out with us. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Beat the algorithm. And I will see you very soon.